legendary royal author Tom Bower is returning with a new book edition ready to expose massive secrets hidden inside Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's marriage. Stick with me, we're about to uncover something buried deep in their marriage that nobody was ever supposed to find. Hidden on page 14 of a 2020 legal document Harry signed is one devastating clause. A trap so lethal it could completely tear his life apart. His reputation destroyed, his brand completely erased, his bond with his kids fractured, and his financial future totally wiped out. The most sickening part: Harry signed this paper during the most emotionally shattered period of his life without fully reading a single word on the page. That one blind signature has been secretly draining and moving money behind the scenes since 2022. Now Tom Bower is screaming one massive warning at the top of his lungs. Harry better prepare to lose absolutely everything. Bower is the man who knows too much. Bower spent years crafting one of the most explosive books ever written on the British royals. When Revenge hit the shelves, it absolutely detonated. Revenge accused Meghan Markle of totally dismantling Harry's family ties, completely manipulating the palace staff, and running a ruthless campaign to rewrite her image while destroying anyone in her way. The book was furious, highly detailed, and meticulously sourced. Meghan's camp reacted with such an aggressive, desperate, and heavily coordinated strike that it raised a massive question Bower simply could not ignore. You and I are probably wondering the exact same thing. What else was hiding out there? So he dug deeper. Bower tracked down 80 people with direct access to Meghan's private world and asked them all one very simple question. What did you actually witness? Who is Meghan when the cameras turn off? Across interview after interview, they painted a portrait of calculations so incredibly consistent and ice cold, it almost felt completely impossible. Buried inside those 80 interviews were three specific accounts that changed absolutely everything. The first bomb dropped from former palace staff who worked directly inside the Sussex household. What they described wasn't just a difficult boss or some demanding high maintenance employer. It was a control system so deliberate multiple staff used the exact same words when speaking to Bower, despite never even talking to each other. Meghan didn't just manage the house, she completely controlled every single piece of information reaching Harry. Messages from his family, calls from his oldest friends, urgent concerns raised by the staff. All of it passed through a strict filter she personally maintained and operated. One former aide looked at Bower and told him directly, Harry lived inside a manufactured reality that Meghan built and managed for him every single day. By the time anyone from outside that bubble tried reaching Harry with the actual truth, he was already fully brainwashed to reject it completely. Staff members who dared to raise concerns weren't given warnings or formal reviews. They were instantly removed from their positions with a terrifying speed that multiple former employees described as unlike anything they had ever witnessed before. Now, pay close attention. Here, the second account came from Hollywood pros working with Meghan. Multiple sources described the exact same pattern without ever talking to each other. She'd build an intensely close working bond with a collaborator, act fiercely loyal, and then brutally cut that person off the absolute second their usefulness ran out. One senior Hollywood figure actually put this in writing, filing a formal warning stating that Meghan's concept of loyalty was so insanely transactional, it was guaranteed to eventually trigger some very serious consequences. But this third finding, Bower calls it the single most explosive discovery across all 80 interviews. Now, top legal professional with direct inside knowledge of the Sussex financial setups told Bower directly that As early as 2019, separate financial structures were already being secretly discussed. Structures that would legally give Meghan totally independent control over all revenue generated by the Sussex brand. Not in 2022, when their marriage started showing massive public fractures. Not after Megxit, when a new California life created obvious heavy strain. No, this happened back in 2019. The couple was still inside the royal family. The perfect love story was still playing out right in front of the cameras. But behind closed doors, the ultimate financial exit strategy was already being quietly constructed. Tom Bauer is a former barrister and elite British journalist with over 40 years of experience hunting down powerful targets who thought they were completely untouchable. He absolutely exposed Robert Maxwell, the media titan who ruthlessly stole hundreds of millions from his own workers' pensions while hiding behind an army of slick lawyers. He ripped into Muhammad Ali, Fayed's shady empire, and dragged out dark secrets Al Fayed paid a fortune to bury. He completely dismantled Simon Cowell's operation. You and I know how this ends. Bauer builds absolutely undeniable cases. He built this case exactly the same way a ruthless lawyer would, using raw documents, perfect timelines, and endless sources. Stick with me here. Every clue was cross referenced until the cracks exploded. That's exactly why The Crazy Panic, his first book, triggered is easily the wildest, most revealing twist of this whole saga. Meghan's heavy hitting legal squad immediately filed a massive formal injunction to block the release before a single reader even saw a page. But that absolute lockdown failed spectacularly. So her team pivoted, firing off brutal formal complaints at three of Bauer's key sources, claiming their involvement totally shattered strict confidentiality pacts. Two terrified sources instantly went ghost. But the third, they flat out refused to fold, but the intense pressure went way beyond legal letters. Sources claimed they were aggressively hounded by fixers they firmly believed were operating directly on Meghan's orders. They were harshly reminded of those ironclad non disclosure contracts they signed years ago, and they were told crystal clear keeping up this alliance with Bauer would absolutely destroy them far more than some book was ever worth. One stressed source told Bauer's crew it didn't even feel like a standard legal battle, it felt like being shown step by step exactly how their entire life would shatter if they kept talking. But Bauer, he dropped the book anyway, tanked every single attack, watched two sources break under pressure, and still hit publish. The crazy fact that he is dropping round two knowing exactly what kind of hellfire is coming his way again proves to you. Now pay close attention to this next part. He is completely fearless because the absolute gold mine he unearthed this time is hidden deep on page 14 of a contract Harry signed back in 2020. And this specific clue makes the whole puzzle finally make perfect sense. But to grasp why this sneaky clause exists, why Meghan knew the exact trap card language to use, and exactly when to slide it across the table to Harry, we have to rewind way back to her very first marriage, long before the prince entered. The chat. Meghan had already played this exact game. Most people completely forgot Trevor. Engelson, her ex husband, a solid Hollywood TV producer who first met Meghan when she was just a struggling unknown. Actress grinding to level up in the brutal industry. They dated for years, finally tying the knot down in Jamaica in 2011, surrounded by their inner circle. Then, boom. 2 years later, Meghan drops divorce papers officially claiming irreconcilable differences. The whole breakup was stealthy, surgical, and over so incredibly fast it barely even made the gossip news. But the insane moves pulled behind the scenes of that settlement, that tells you absolutely everything about her upcoming master plan. When Meghan finally sat down to negotiate the split from Trevor, the legal squad on his side was completely unprepared for the absolute raid they walked into. She didn't just bring one lawyer, she rolled up with an entire strike team. She had memorized every single line of every document before day one. She interrogated every single clause ruthlessly, pushing back on any tiny detail that didn't guarantee her absolute long term financial freedom. But the real secret almost nobody talks about is the you saw that too, right? She actually used this specific financial arrangement as a direct master level blueprint. According to insiders who actually know Engelson Meghan's squad, sneaked a ruthless clause into the contract, granting her 100% ownership of any future massive payouts linked to projects she brainstormed during the marriage. Yeah, even if those ideas hadn't actually made a single dime before the split. Engelson only realized the brutal truth months after the ink was dry. He discovered that this exact trap had entirely locked him out of several major projects he personally helped build. He confessed the nightmare to a super close friend, saying it felt exactly like opening a familiar door, only to realize he had just stepped into an entirely different, terrifying dimension. That exact same cold logic and absolute dominance over future wealth potential shows up. Almost word for word inside the 2020 prenup update Meghan eventually had Harry sign. The ultimate leveling up lesson she grabbed from her first marriage was permanently locked in. Protect your money making power above all else. When you leave, walk away with absolutely nothing, chaining you to someone else's choices. Make a clean surgical break that leaves you entirely untouchable and holding the reins of whatever destiny comes next. But the second skill Meghan leveled up during that divorce was way darker. The player who controls the narrative completely controls the end game. The second, the split from Trevor, hit the public. She manipulated the PR with a ruthless precision her own friends called honestly terrifying. Trevor wasn't even painted as the big bad villain. No, he was just totally erased from existence. Fast forward 1 year, and her biggest fans couldn't even remember his name. She didn't just destroy the guy, she made him completely irrelevant. The massive fallout with her father Thomas Markle perfectly fits this exact sinister pattern, and it goes way deeper than the media's version. What almost no one has fully leaked yet is that during the months before the royal wedding, Meghan's legal hitters fired a strict formal warning directly to Thomas Markle advising, so, what do you and I make of this? Any media leak would trigger absolute war over shattered confidentiality. Arrangement he supposedly agreed to. Thomas Markle publicly claimed he never put his signature on any agreement like that, but let us dive in, because word from the Markle family strongly suggests this legal paper definitely exists. Legal steps were actively taken to silence him completely, way before he even did a single damaging thing publicly. A guy with major press connections and an unpredictable vibe got silenced before the wedding, basically erased from Meghan's life, exactly the same way Trevor Engelson was wiped away years prior. Around this exact time, researchers for Tom Bauer uncovered a secret that completely flips the timeline of everything coming up. When Meghan started dating Harry in 2016, she absolutely did not sit around waiting to see where things went before acting. She hired the firm Sunshine Sachs almost immediately. Not months later, not post engagement, right away. And Sunshine Sachs is definitely not some random PR firm you just hire because you are happy about a brand new romance. This massive company built its entire reputation on handling very specific, heavy work, crisis management, and high stakes celebrity divorces. They are famous for shielding massive celebrity brands during the absolute most explosive high pressure moments of their entire lives. They even managed Katie Holmes when she finally left. Tom Cruise. Now watch closely here. When a woman starting a fresh romance with a literal prince hires them on day one, she is not dreaming about a honeymoon. She is already plotting the exit strategy. By the time Prince Harry finally slipped that engagement ring directly onto Meghan Markle's finger, she had already been running this exact same playbook for years. She fiercely maintained her personal income, built up an independent identity, and locked down financial setups that simply did not rely on a single other person. She kept that heavyweight crisis firm on speed dial, alongside a ruthless pattern of abruptly ending relationships the second they became inconvenient. A cold strategy that always kept her perfectly safe. But Harry did not know a single thing. He was completely dazzled, totally broken, and absolutely certain he had finally found the one woman who truly understood his pain. He had zero clue. The woman standing right next to him was already figuring out how to perfectly structure the exit plan. And by the time the royal wedding ended and the flashing cameras vanished, the heavy groundwork was fully laid for absolutely everything that came next. But to grasp what Harry signed in 2020, you first have to understand how royal prenuptial agreements function in reality, because they are absolutely nothing like the normal legal contracts folks have seen. Page 14, Clause 7. A standard prenuptial agreement is pretty simple. It just clearly lists what each person brings into a marriage and explains how shared stuff gets split up if the couple eventually separates. But these royal prenups operate on a completely different, insane level. They are strictly designed to shield massive assets that belong not to the actual couple but to the royal crown itself. They lock down properties held in trust for future generations' rules about keeping those shiny royal titles post, separation plus crazy detailed language controlling public behavior, and exactly what can and cannot go to the press. You and I know these are not casual papers. They are intense legal architectures, built purely to control public image, wealth, and outcomes for literal decades. So when Harry and Meghan signed their original prenuptial agreement before the 2018 wedding, it was built to handle the wild collision between that strict royal framework and California state law. Under California community property rules, every single thing earned during a marriage is considered 50-50 owned by both spouses. That means streaming deals, huge media contracts, brand revenue, and any cash made from businesses launched after that wedding date. The very first prenup actually tried to set some clear boundaries around this, but that specific 2020 amendment completely destroyed every single protection Harry thought he had. What almost nobody talks about is the crazy specific timeline when Harry actually signed that amendment. According to a reliable source, with direct inside knowledge of this timeline, the sneaky document was pushed in front of Harry just days after the formally announcement claiming the Duke and Duchess of Sussex were permanently stepping back from royal duties. At that exact moment, Harry was dealing with the total collapse of his royal identity, a massive public fight with his brother, the sudden removal of his elite security detail, and the terrifying new reality of having zero income and no real role for the very first time in his entire life. Mental health experts who carefully analyzed his public statements, described this dark period as one of severe, acute psychological crisis. His legal team back then was almost entirely focused on fighting those massive media lawsuits in the UK. His California lawyers were far less experienced with the dangerous traps of these specific prenuptial amendments. Under California law, the amendment got pushed to him as simple routine paperwork, a totally standard update to reflect their brand new business activities. Harry trusted Meghan entirely, so he blindly signed, but he had absolutely no clue what he had just given away. So, what do we make of this? He signed a ruthless intellectual property trap buried on page 14. Intellectual. All right, stick with me. We are unpacking a massive celebrity trap. Property covers everything: brand names, logos, trademarks, and even rights to stories, books, and media. It means cashing in on a person's exact name and face. Heck, it even covers cash flow tied to someone's public identity. But get this specific clause did not split things 50-50. According to Bauer's sources, it handed Meghan total primary control over the Sussex, brand shared projects, media drops, and even profits from Harry's memoir Spare. It literally listed her as the sole business manager for everything they shared. Under California law, that hands her the absolute dominant legal high ground in any money fight. But Bauer points out one tiny detail as the absolute knife in the back. It does not just lock down current projects, it uses future proof wording that traps literally any new idea built on assets, connections, or platforms born during their marriage. So, what? Watch closely. Here, this is insane. In practice, even if Harry walked away tomorrow, started totally fresh, and built something completely new, if that venture relied on his royal past, his Invictus platform, or his massive public status as a Sussex or any connection made during their marriage, Meghan holds a solid legal claim to it. This is definitely not just a standard divorce clause, it is a lifetime financial trap with zero expiration date. The very name Harry was born with, and the life he actually lived, legally speaking, it becomes mostly hers to command. Bauer even tracked down exactly where this vicious language came from. The exact same legal team that handled Meghan's first divorce from Trevor Engelson was brought in for this crazy amendment. They already knew her playbook, they knew her endgame, and they forged a brutal clause that mirrored with absolute deadly precision the harsh lessons she took from marriage number one. She spent years waiting to launch this on a massive scale. Harry signed it during his darkest hour, backed by literally no one he could trust. Zero independent lawyers yelling at him to stop. He signed simply because she asked. And by the time the ink dried, the steel trap snapped shut. That clause alone flipped the whole board. But hey, the paper contract only works if the actual money pipeline is built to match it. So while Harry was publicly falling apart, over the next few years fighting toxic London court battles and breaking down Meghan, was chilling in California quietly and ruthlessly, constructing an empire built from the ground up to survive the marriage collapsing and leave him totally empty handed. A massive empire she built completely alone. You and I both know what happens next. By 2022, the vibe completely shifted. You could feel it, even if nobody said it out loud. Meghan stopped doing events with Harry unless a strict contract demanded it. Those joint PR interviews vanished. That perfect couple image started shattering. And while the media wasted time gossiping about their drama, Meghan was making major power moves. She was quietly filing legal documents. American Riviera Orchard dropped first. a shiny lifestyle brand registered as a trademark purely under her name alone. Zero mention of Harry in the files. No shared ownership, no joint signatures anywhere. Then that massive podcast deal. With Lemon Media hit the scene and boom structured with her listed as the sole boss. Even that sweet family book? The bench was set up with zero financial ties to Harry at all. Every single business structure Meghan created during this exact time frame screamed the same warning. She was not building a fairy tale future with Harry. She was forging a personal fortress. What almost nobody caught was the exact loophole Bauer's sources claim was used to secretly move massive funds from shared accounts straight into Meghan's private solo bank during this era. According to one sharp financial advisor, who spilled to Bauer the entire strategy relied on making things called single member LLCs in California. What is that? It is a limited liability company owned entirely by one single person, completely legally walled off from any shared marriage assets. Meghan reportedly spawned multiple shadow companies just like this each, hoarding specific assets and cash flows. Because under California law, any income funneled into these LLCs before hitting a joint account can legally be claimed as the absolute separate property of the sole owner. Bauer's sources tracked down at least 5 entities created purely in Meghan's name between 2022 and 2024. Harry is completely invisible on all of them. That giant Netflix deal shows us exactly how the cash actually flowed, widely reported. As a massive $100 million deal, it was never actually guaranteed upfront. Hollywood insiders explained to Bauer that the $100 million was just a maximum payout, only if every single contracted project was fully delivered. So, what do we make of this? The documentary and cooking show happened, but the animated series Pearl. Stick with me here. That massive show got cancelled before airing and other projects vanished. According to Bauer's sources, the actual cash they got before Netflix slashed that deal was roughly $40 million. The massive question Bauer pushed his insiders to answer was, where did all 40 million go? And exactly how did that cash flow? That reported $38 million debt tied to the Sussex accounts is absolutely not what it looks like. Most people seeing that insane number assumed wild, reckless spending. But Bauer's inside financial experts revealed something way more calculated. A massive chunk of that debt is perfectly structured. So the heavy liabilities look like a shared couple's problem, while the real financial crush lands right on Harry's side. The trick involves strict personal guarantees. When couples co-sign debts, the California courts check who actually got the biggest economic benefit from all that spending. If Meghan can prove those massive costs were mostly tied to Harry's own legal cases, his solo international trips, and his personal projects, instead of their shared businesses, the courts could dump a gigantic unfair share of that debt onto him. Bauer insists this was no accident. The exact spending pattern from 2022 forward was carefully designed for this exact result. Every single advisor he interviewed used the exact same word textbook. Now pay close attention here. By 2023, every piece was locked in, trademarks secured, business filings were filed, solid legal protections dropped into place, and Meghan's name sat right at the top of every official. Paper tied to Archewell. That gave her absolute legal control over all decisions at the exact second it would actually matter. Meanwhile, Harry, he was over in London, sitting in courtrooms, fighting judges, literally crying openly, and burning cash on legal wars his own team warned would completely ruin him. Bauer's insiders brought up a highly disturbing question about this exact time frame. They asked why did Meghan keep pushing him into those UK court fights even after Harry's lawyers clearly warned him about the brutal financial risk. The answer his sources gave is crazy. Under their prenup amendment, all those legal debts would crash down on Harry alone once a divorce was officially filed. Meghan had zero reason to stop him. Actually, she had every reason to let him keep burning cash. She built the fortress. She locked down the assets. She perfectly rigged the massive debts to land straight on him. And now there was only one single thing left to do. She had to completely control the narrative before anyone else talked. So she made a quick call to a firm she previously worked with. A ruthless firm that knew exactly how to twist a story in the quiet months right before everything went completely public. And the very second that call connected, the final phase kicked off the endgame. In January 2026, Meghan brought back Sunshine Sachs. On the surface, it just looked like a standard business move. A celebrity, hiring back her old PR team, the exact kind of thing that happens in Hollywood every single week without drawing much attention. But you and I know better. Experts who actually understand high profile divorce tactics told Bauer this was anything but routine. You never hire a hardcore crisis management firm that specializes in brutal separations unless that split is already happening. You bring them in 3 to 6 months early. So by the time the legal papers drop, the general public already bought a narrative that makes you look like the sweet victim and your partner look like the total nightmare. The story, planted in those quiet months before filing, is the one that sticks. It completely shapes how the custody war gets framed. It dictates what everyone believes before a single real court paper goes public. But here is what has never been reported. Anywhere, the exact advice Meghan allegedly got from a top tier Hollywood divorce lawyer way back in late 2020. Advice that completely shaped everything she did next. According to an insider close to that lawyer, Meghan was warned that the absolute best way to grab ultimate legal power in a California divorce with a massive public figure spouse was to make herself the undeniable commercial boss of their brand before they ever separated. Period. California courts always look at who actually built the money. If one partner can prove they were the genius architect of the business, the creative engine, the main deal maker, and the brand's true face, then that spouse enters. The money fights holding all the cards. Every single move Meghan made from 2022 onward, the solo failings, the solo side hustles taking over all the public media matches that lawyers advise flawlessly. Bauer was super clear about this legal countdown. California family law demands exactly 6 months of residency before any divorce petition gets officially filed. Meghan. She has been living in California for years. Bauer's insiders told him she could strike right within 6 months of January 2026. And the second she files, everything built since 2020 drops at once. Page 14's IP clause hits. The assets she built lock down completely. So, what do you and I make of this masterclass? Place. The trademarks, the business registrations, all those massive financial flows quietly rooted far away from their jointly held entities. Stick with me here. This exact legal framework is what a California court uses to decide ownership. And Harry, he will walk right into that courtroom, completely stripped of the heavy protections he truly believed he had. Bauer's deep dive into Harry across this specific time period. That's the part of the story that absolutely hits the hardest. Because this isn't just a portrait of some foolish or weak man. It's a portrait of someone completely destroyed. Harry entered this marriage shattered in ways that most regular people literally cannot even imagine. His mother died violently when he was just 12, and the royal family's response: suppress his grief, train him to fake total composure for the cameras. He spent literal decades carrying that damage, handed a ceremonial role, giving him zero real purpose and absolutely no true identity. The deep dependency he built on external validation was so incredibly total that people close to him actually described it to Bauer as something closer to an open wound than a personality trait. And Meghan, from the start, truly understood that wound and weaponized it. Watch closely here, this gets crazy. Former palace staff described a marriage to Bauer where Meghan controlled Harry's entire information environment with an iron grip. Old friends who tried reaching out described the totally eerie experience of getting through to him briefly, only to watch him sharply pull away within days. It was exactly as though something was whispered to him, in strict private, that flipped his mind. Every single person who might have pushed back, who might have asked a difficult question or shown him any different version of reality, completely removed. By the time the whole Megxit event actually happened, Harry had zero inner circle left, just her. He was totally alone in a foreign country, heavily and financially dependent on a woman whose personal exit strategy had already been running for years. Former household staff described to Bauer a marriage that had been brutally fracturing in private long before it ever leaked to the public. There was shouting loud enough to be heard through thick closed doors and cold stretches of silence lasting for days. Harry's explosive behavior in those London courtrooms, the eye, wild arguments with judges, those raw, open breakdowns, that wasn't the behavior of a man with a secure home waiting. That was the desperate behavior of a man who already knew on some deeply wordless level that something was catastrophically wrong, but couldn't fix it. Now you and I need to brace ourselves. The custody dimension is what close sources describe as the absolute most devastating element of this entire nightmare. Under California family law, local courts establish custody arrangements based heavily on the care pattern exactly at the time of filing. And Harry has spent a massive portion of the last 3 years far outside California, flying to the UK for court cases, attending Invictus events internationally. All while Meghan stayed planted in California, super present in the children's daily lives, basically serving as the main primary caregiver in practical terms, completely regardless of whatever secret private arrangement actually exists between them. Bauer's inside sources say that once divorce papers drop, Meghan's legal team will immediately submit massive documentation of Harry's physical absence pattern as hard evidence, supporting her strict application for primary custody. What Bauer ultimately predicts for Harry isn't just a simple divorce, it is an absolute complete dismantling. He loses the Montecito mansion under the asset, structures already firmly in place. He loses his majority control of Archewell and the entire Sussex brand under that intellectual property clause he blindly signed without even reading. He faces a brutal custody fight he's basically already losing. And under the forward looking language, hiding on page 14, the legal right to monetize his own royal identity, write another book, or launch another personal project built on who he actually is, that could largely belong to her for years to come. Harry signed away his exact name, his brand, his kids' primary home, and his entire financial future. He signed it at the absolute most broken and isolated moment of his adult life purely because Meghan placed it right in front of him. And he had nobody left to tell him to stop. By the time Harry finally understands the massive scope of what he gave away, the legal machinery will already be in motion, and it'll be way too late to change anything. Those clauses activated, all the assets completely separated, the public narrative perfectly shaped and planted by Sunshine Sachs across those crucial months before. Filing will be the exact version of events the world believes. And Harry, the guy who gave up everything for a love story. Here's what stays with me. He's left holding the wreckage of a plan he never knew existed.